Do you find yourself feeling stuck in a challenge, spinning your wheels no matter what you do? Well, it may be because you are hitting your upper limit. So today we are talking about whose upper limit are you living? I think it's going to be filled with surprises for you. So let's get started.
Welcome to the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, a place for the strong, sensitive, spiritual seeker to recognize the perfection of your human journey as a emotional and spiritual worlds through proven and grounded frameworks that support you to live in the wholeness you already are. For over the past 2 decades, I have supported people from all around the world, as well as Fortune 500 companies, to dissolve the divisions within them and live with greater empowerment and love. This podcast is an exploration of the paradoxes that befuddle us as we live our lives being both human and divine. Together, you and I, along with other experts, will navigate integrating psychology and spirituality, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the darkness and the light, to create greater sacred union from within. I believe through your remembering that you are innately divine, that you will allow yourself to more openly shine. So let's get to it, because your unique light is needed more than ever.
Hello there, beautiful souls. I'm excited to be back with you. Today we are talking about whose upper limit are you living? So I love this idea about upper limits because it really is this indicator of when we start hitting a wall or hitting that inner glass ceiling where we've reached this level where we find ourselves just getting stuck. And no matter what we do, we keep spinning in it. So we're going to be talking about all these ways that we unintentionally limit ourselves. I'm thinking about how I am limiting myself to good weather right now by living in Wisconsin. And let me tell you, I think I've reached my lower limit of tolerance to the cold. And this is actually like a big deal. Me and my husband talk about this. He's tired of the cold. His work is here. And so our negotiation has been to get out as much as possible during the winter. And so that means January, February, March, we've got to find ways to get the heck out of here, even April. And I think we're going to do it. January was awesome. We got to go to the Galapagos, and that was like a bucket list experience. And it just really came out of nowhere. It happened in like 2 months. So that's a whole nother story. But I really want to invite us to get into today our upper limits. Maybe another day we'll talk about lower limits. Maybe that's the next episode. But these upper limits, I think, are so fascinating because we may not even recognize them. And that's why they become these upper limits. But you are my beautiful wise ones that are here, that you're curious, that you're willing to go towards a challenge to figure it out. And we're really going to do this holistically and to look at what I see 3 common ways of ways that we are living an upper limit that isn't our truth, and how we can approach those, as well as the limitations to looking at that as a limit of how we are living our lives. So let's get into it. The first one I'm going to talk about is probably not new to you, but it's how our parents, who are our first coaches, our first guide into every aspect of our life, how they can have their own blind spots, places that weren't their strengths, and that gets passed down to you. Now, hold on. This is not an episode about blaming our parents, and I'm going to get into that in one moment, because that certainly is the limitation to looking at this. But I want to start here because your parents had the first influence on you. And so it's really important that we see them and honor them on their human journey, because sometimes I think we look at our parents, and I've done this, we've looked at our parents like they're superhuman and they don't have the problems that we have. And oh my gosh, of course they have. We, as children, we often don't have a freaking clue the full extent of our parents' challenges because as humans, we tend to keep our challenges to ourselves. We try to hide them because we're ashamed of them. And so our parents were each navigating their own challenges and doing it based on the culture of their generation. And so how they knew to work through things worked for their generation, and it might not have worked for your generation. And so it's just understanding that your parents, what they had to work with is what they had to work with, and they gave you the skills and understanding that they knew that they the best way that they knew how. And so, being human, there's going to be limits to that, but there's also going to be gifts to that. And so, I think this is an important piece to look at because this is what can get passed down generationally, and we may not even recognize it. So, this is why it's often this first stop when you go to therapy, is because you're used to the water, the fishbowl that you've been swimming in, and this fishbowl is made up of your family and the way your family does things. And you may have no clue that, oh, well, the way your family expresses anger is a lot of rage and blame, and that's not the best way to express anger or whatever it is, right? And so this is a great way to be able to look at, hey, if I have anger that's coming out sideways, where I'm blaming people, where people are telling me that my anger is too much, overwhelming for them, then we can look back on our parents and the framework that we were given, not to blame them, but to bring understanding as to how that may be have has impacted you and your understanding and what's comfortable and not comfortable for you, whether it's healthy or not, right? And so this is where we start. You may also have seen some aspects of your parents where, okay, they have some strengths over here, but man, they had this blind spot, and I want to be sure I'm not acting like this blind spot. So maybe you had a parent that was a doormat, and you're like, I am not going to be that doormat. And then we go to the other extreme. And so this too can be a way where the upper limits that we're living are based on our parents' blind spots. You either unconsciously fall into that pattern, or you're trying to be so conscious not to fall into that pattern because you judge them, that there's a lack of forgiveness that takes you to another extreme that's going to create its own set of upper limits over on the other side of the spectrum. And so this is where we really want to be able to look from within about what has been passed down to us generation from generation, and be willing to address and process it from love, compassion, forgiveness, understanding that we are all on our human journey. That again, our parents, whether you feel that they did it right or did it did not serve you well, is a judgment you want to heal for yourself. Because when we place blame on another, even our parents, we are responding from a lack of love. And that lack of love or understanding is going to keep you contracted. And it's that contraction will be a limit for you because we can only go so far with whatever the contraction is. So when it comes to parents, it's either we have the unconscious patterns of their contraction, or we've seen aspects of them that we've judged, and now we're going to be the exact opposite, and we go to such an extreme with that it makes us do that from a contracted place. So not something to blame, but be able to see and overcome, not just for yourself, because what we're saying is this is a generational piece. You want to do this for yourself. Yes, absolutely. But also, if you have children, please, you want to process this in a healthy way. You want to understand your challenges and your limits from patterns that have been passed down and how you've tried to navigate them in a healthy way for your children, your partner, anyone that you interact with, because that's the ripple effect that we have. Now, I'm going to give you ways that we want to look at these upper limits and the limit to looking at these upper limits in this way. And the limit is that it's helpful to see unhealthy patterns that were passed down to you. Absolutely. You want to be able to do that. This is the only way that you can change them. But, and this I think has been the historical thing when we look at our parents. If you go to blaming, you take away power from you to change this in a healthy, empowered way that you are supposed to know this from within so that you actually can change the trajectory of your life, the trajectory of outcomes that have been in your family. It's not going to, you're only going to be able to work through this if it's not coming from blame from them. Because blame automatically says, I don't have responsibility for this, it's on them. And that's going to take away your power to do the changes that you need to make from within in order to change this pattern in a healthy way. And so it's disempowering yourself. And this is where I see a lot of people, they remain in what I call therapy limbo, where your experience is validated. And that's important. We want to have experiences where we didn't feel like we got the nurturance or support or whatever it is that we needed, that needs to be validated, absolutely. And and how are we going to grow from that? And what can happen is that we can stay in, and again, this therapy limbo land where you get validated and validated and validated and not challenged on how you're going to change that. And so the validation piece is very important. We don't need to jump to how are we going to change that, but you'll know even when you're in therapy that things are getting stifled because it keeps going back to blaming your parents. And it's like, okay, haven't we gone through this? And this was actually one of my first experiences of feeling that I needed to go beyond my degree in clinical psychology. Because back when I was getting my degree in clinical psychology, I was also going to therapy. And I went through the whole thing. And there was, as an emotionally sensitive person, there were things that I was wanting to process. And it went often to blaming my parents. And I was like, all right, like that's where it went. And it was good in that I felt validated. And then there came a point where I was like, okay, been there, done that. Like, can we move on? And it was like the therapist didn't want to move on, but I was like, I'm good. I get it. And so this is actually part of my story of why I went from clinical psychology right away into like a spiritual personal coach model, even when that was not really a thing back when I graduated, because I saw the limitations there. Now, I'm not saying every therapist is like that, and perhaps that was something where therapy gravitated to back when I was going through it, but I knew that that was going to be a limit for my own growth because I didn't have the words for this, that it wasn't allowing me to take personal responsibility for my life. I wanted to feel empowered, and I was kind of done with that story. And so it's a good thing if you start to feel stifled in therapy or you're not growing. This could be part of the reason because you've gotten the validation piece and now you're ready to go step into more of an empowerment piece. So this leads me to point number 2, which is our mentors. So you want to have mentors, people who are teaching you about the areas of life that you feel stuck in. Because oftentimes, the people who are teaching you how to overcome a challenge are teaching it because they too have had to overcome the challenge. So, this is the beauty. If your parents didn't have that challenge, or your parents unknowingly brought, generationally passed down that challenge to you, well, there's mentors who have gone before you and can guide you through what they've already overcome, what they've learned to overcome, because that's their life's purpose, that's their passion. And so we don't have to feel alone. Even if there's no one else in your family, no one else in your circle that is going through this challenge, there's someone out there that's had a similar challenge to you, or the root of what is causing the struggle. They will be able to support you through this. And so, people, again, who are teaching this stuff typically are doing so based on their own struggles. And when they get through it, they're going to be able to provide you the shortcuts so that you don't have to stay in the same patterns or get tripped up on the same aspects that trip them up. They're going to try to provide you with the shortcut because it's their passion, because it's exciting for them that they've been able to overcome it, and they want the same for you, right? And so there's others that can support you. We want to use our rational mind here, that it is worth paying for a mentor or training or a skill if it means it's going to alleviate you suffering. If it means it's going to alleviate a problem that would keep you stuck for years or decades. Because often that struggle is going to cost you a lot more. Back in the day when I did couples coaching, people would come to me, and couples coaching was an investment. And I just said, hey, the reality is this is an investment. You're going to learn skills, and it's about really you learning the individual internal skills that you need to have so that you're not unconsciously passing your needs, your psychological needs onto your partner, which happens all the time. You're going to learn that skill, and that will change the dynamics between how you relate with one another. Or on the other side of this, you don't get the help, you don't get the support you need at the level that you need it. And trust me, divorce costs a lot more. The emotional toll, the physical toll, the financial toll. And so it's just reality. Like, I would rather you invest in something that's supportive to you and proactive than paying the price later. And so we really want to be able to recognize, if this has been an ongoing challenge, it's worth it to you, even though your ego is going to fight it, to invest in yourself. And this is an act of self-love, that we step into the support and getting the support that we need. Now, the limit to mentors is that you want to be sure that the mentor that you're seeking has actually worked through their struggles and have done so in a healthy and empowered way, and has the outcomes that you actually desire. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but you want to learn how, if to do something in a healthy way, you've got to make sure that person has done it in a healthy way that resonates with you. You want to know how to have a healthy relationship, choose a therapist or coach that actually has a healthy relationship, right? I mean, it sounds kind of straightforward, but this isn't always the case. And I'm not saying that this is about perfection by any means. You could have a coach or therapist who's gone through divorce, and because of the divorce, they have learned a lot around dynamics that don't work and patterns that don't work and what does, because now they're in a healthy, long-term, lasting relationship that is flourishing, right? So this is important, that outcome piece is there. And a lot of times we don't even bother asking, and then you are going to hit your mentor's upper limit. So if you start feeling stuck, it could be that you're also experiencing where, as far as your mentor has grown as well. So what has been interesting to me, I don't really talk about relationships that much, but my daughter is now in her early 20s, and her friends have we've taken them out to breakfast or what have you, and their friends have asked me, how do you have a relationship where your husband still adores you? I mean, it was like the sweetest thing, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing that you recognize this. And for me, it was really saying this is more about an inner skill that I've had to learn, where previously I would have had unmet psychological needs and not know how to give them to myself, and would have unconsciously put them on someone else. And by doing the emotional pieces that I've had to do to learn and grow, that has allowed me to know how to take care of my psychological needs, so that when I am asking something from my husband, it's not coming from this place of like, you haven't met my need, and now I feel that you failed me. And and that whole energy of what we put on each other in our relationships, where one person feels like they've constantly failed. This is like a huge thing that I see in relationships, and that is individual work that each person in the relationship wants to do for themselves, so that when they come together, when they ask for something to be different, it's not coming from a place of blame. It's coming from a place of love, of the of knowing how to support the relationship as a whole, rather than individual needs. So you do the inner alchemy. That's what I call it, the inner alchemy of finding the gold in your own darkness. And you bring up those pieces of gold, and they become integrated within you. And you're having a whole different conversation with a partner than what you would have had, right? So, because it's coming from love rather than expectation, fear, neediness, which are the common things that happen when we're not taught that first and foremost in a relationship, you want to be able to address your own psychological needs first. So I get it. It can be very difficult to understand like where a mentor is at, especially with online, because people can create these masterful stories. I think if any of you have watched the apple cider vinegar on Netflix, I mean, it just makes me cringe. I just feel so terrible that there's people that are sharing either flat out lies or half truths, and how devastating it is for people. And it's scary. And then there's AI technology on top of it, where you can make things look like something that there aren't. What I'll say is that I get to see behind the scenes with other coaches and therapists. And what I see when things go sideways is that they want to help people. And so much so, they ignore the aspects of their life that aren't working, or they get swayed by marketing teams to present themselves in a certain way so that they can help others. So, and this can happen really easily. I had someone on my marketing team that came in, and she was helping me with some copy, and we were looking at one of my programs, and she's like, oh, let me just, I just put this testimonial to it, and let me put it out there. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. That testimonial is for a completely different program, and I'm not going to say that this person has these outcomes when this program was a much smaller program. But it's just like that. It's in the you can have somebody on your team that's like, hey, this is the way to go, this is the way to market yourself. And I'm like, no, no way. Karma is a biatch. I don't want to go there. It's not worth it. And so it's important that you're choosing people that you can feel that sense of what they value, and then it matches your values, I guess, is the best way to go about that. I am so sensitive to this because I want to make sure that every bit of what I'm saying is true because I know what it's like to be bamboozled. So I know what I'm saying is true. I mean, even in my messaging, every piece of print I share in an email, a website, it's just so important that it's accurate because it's not fun to have someone bring your hopes up that they can support you, but they aren't being completely honest. They're not sharing the other parts that are falling apart in their life, right? And that to me is like I just again, I couldn't do that because that's like karma and I just there's too much payback when that happens. And so it's just important again to try to find those values. And so what are you supposed to do? How can you look for this? Well, I think it's being able to look for mentors, for therapists who are able to admit where they've made mistakes in life, where they've screwed it up, and how they've grown from it. Because otherwise, if they are painting a picture that sounds too good to be true without sharing their path of how they overcame this, because there's always a journey involved. And so, what you don't want is someone that's like, yeah, here's your problem, and I'm the solution, and here's the magic, right? It's like, I was broke and now I make millions. Well, there's got to be a path, a journey that you went on that people can replicate, that there's a skill to it that you want to be looking for. And so that is one of the ways that you can make sure or try to make sure that your mentor is walking their talk, that they have overcome what you are looking to overcome. You can also ask if where they are with a certain outcome. A lot of times you go to a therapist, do you know what the therapist relationship is like? How they handle challenges? If they're in a loving relationship now that's working for them. I mean, we think it sounds invasive, but honestly, like that's what you want. You want someone who's overcome something to support you. Otherwise, you're going to hit their upper limit. So it's not that they can't support you completely, that they may be able to get you to a certain point, but then you may be hitting their upper limit. Last but not least is your own ego's upper limit. And this, of course, is the biggest component to our upper limits. It's your ego's upper limit of what feels safe. Your ego is there to keep you safe at all costs, really. It will keep you in a state until you insist with all your being that you no longer need your ego's protection at that same level. So it's the ego's job to protect you. It's this false self that's been created because your essence, your inner being has been hurt. And it got hurt likely during a time when you did not have the skills to know how to process that. And so these layers of the ego form for this protection, and you are the only one that can tell your ego, good, I've got this. It's worth me facing that fear and pain again in order to grow rather than stay stuck, limited by this upper limit. So your ego puts safety above your desires. So you desire love, which we all do, but your ego wants to protect you, right? And so it doesn't want you to get hurt again. And so it won't allow in the feeling and intimacy of love that you crave. And it's so easy then for your ego to blame another. But if it's a pattern, if it's something that you've experienced over and over within a relationship, that's your ego's upper limit. You desire to feel more abundance in your life, but your ego wants to ensure that you don't go broke. And you end up constantly struggling with money. You desire to feel more joyful and expansive, right? Why we are here to feel the joyfulness and expansiveness of life. But your ego keeps you contracted by this constant negative loops that we find ourselves in that focuses on the pain. So the only way to break free from your ego's upper limit is to be able to recognize any ways that it is showing up. So I want to share with you one of the ways I kept experiencing my ego's upper limit. And it really showed up for me as a discomfort with being in the spotlight, especially a surprise kind of spotlight. So, what I mean by that is when I would be called on in a group out of nowhere, I would literally feel my chakra, my throat tighten up. And like I couldn't talk. I, it would just be, I would start coughing. Like it was crazy. And it would also be in these unintentional moments when something that was playful and it was going well, and then all of a sudden people started to notice, it would make me freeze. So, an instance of this is the game where you're shooting basketball, I don't know, like a arcade thing where you're against someone and you're shooting the basketball into the hoop and making points, right? And I'm just going for it and playing, playing, playing. Well, little did I know that I was beating my husband at it. And so he starts, you know, harassing me a little bit about it, like, and giving me the business. I'm like, oh, you're going to choke and all that, not knowing this is a story of mine, a trigger of mine. And I totally freeze. Right. And then I'm mad at him that he did that. But so this is what I mean about doing your own psychology, because I'm laughing at this now, but I'm telling you, once you hear the story, you'll understand why. And this is how our partners are actually there to help us grow by unintentionally triggering us so that we pay attention to these seemingly moments that aren't a big deal, but do something inside of us that limits us. So what I do is when I notice that something is limiting me, this is where I want to do the inner work. Even though it may seem like it's not a big deal, I felt limited, and that's not an experience that I like having, right? And neither do you. That's why you're here. So this is where you do the inner work to create that inner alchemy, which is when all the pieces come together inside of you to bring the ahas, the breakthroughs, the transformation. And it's not just a one and done thing. So for me, it always starts with, what is the negative feeling that I'm experiencing or negative emotions? Because that is going to be a signal to help guide me of where I'm out of alignment. So there's a whole process to this. It's something that I teach. We don't have time to get into it here, but you want to know that any negative feeling is there. It's alerting you. It's saying, hey, there's something off inwardly, and we can use that signal to help guide us as to how we got off track, what we think is happening inside of us when we're getting triggered, and how to begin to reprogram that. So when you learn the skill of how to listen to your negative feelings as allies, they will support you to connect this feeling to a past experience that you are unknowingly reliving. So here's what I was reliving. So I go to this negative feeling, this trigger, relating it back to being on the spotlight. And this takes me back to an experience that I had when I was 5 years old. And on my fifth birthday, which was my golden birthday, my mom and I think some other family members took me to see Bozo the Clown, Bozo's Circus. So this is going to age me, but it was on WGN. So I think this was like I think you could air it, it was aired nationally, but it was in Chicago, and that's where I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. So I get to go to Bozo's Circus for my birthday. And my mom has it so that I get to do the Bozo buckets. And there's 10 buckets laid out. And the job is to take a ping pong ball and one by one make it into these buckets until you get to the 10th one where you can win the grand prize. Now, I've been watching this show, since a toddler and seeing the kids that, make the buckets and either almost get to the grand prize or even some lucky ones that get the grand prize. I don't even know what the grand prize was, but, it was just the fact that they did it. They got to that 10th bucket. So this is a total shock and surprise to me. And my mom's so excited for me. And here I go and I go up on stage and I think I'm all dressed up and I completely freeze. I don't know if it was seeing Bozo the Clown with his big red hair, in person or the other characters, but I completely freeze. And I'm telling you, I don't know if I missed either the first bucket or for sure the second bucket. Like I, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see, but basically I had the little ping pong and I think I just like let go of it. Like I just froze. I just froze. And everybody, of course, was looking at me and I could feel even then their embarrassment for me, right? It was like, oh my gosh, this girl totally blew it, right? And I just remember going off the stage and just being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I think I was crying. And I was just so disappointed in myself, right? I was just so disappointed. And I think it was like one of those where it was so bad, like no one knew what to say to me. And, it was just kind of like, everyone was kind of loss of words, sure trying to comfort me, but it was just kind of like, yeah, wow, you really blew it, right? That was not said to me, but that was just the overall feeling that I felt from the experience. Okay. So I blew my shot. That's what I was carrying with me, was that when the spotlight is on me, that I'm going to blow it and I'm just this failure in front of everyone. And so it was showing up in these little ways. So the first time the memory came back to me and into my conscious awareness, I I felt bad for my inner child. So part of the psychological work that some of you I'm sure are familiar with, you go back to your inner child, the part of you that experienced that and her emotions, right? Or his emotions. And so I could see what was causing me to freeze, especially whenever I felt like the spotlight was on me. But I did not know how to truly be there for her yet. So the first time it was kind of like, oh, awareness. Aha. That's why I feel this way. But I didn't know really what to do about it. So the universe is going to keep creating similar patterns so that we can overcome them. So these small instances of being where I feel like I'm in the spotlight, everyone's looking at me, and to support me to be able to process what happened during an age when I couldn't process it and help me find my way back to my truth and liberate myself from the past. So the universe is not trying to punish you when you keep going through patterns. It loves you. The divine loves you so much that it's going to keep repeating so that we may be in pain, but the pain is to support you to ultimately liberate yourself. So I kept having these experiences so I could go back and learn how to truly soothe her. And I had to learn to be with her and say, you know what? The things that matter to us, we will get to practice and learn the skill and build the skill. Like that was like something you didn't ever practice with the skill before. You didn't know how to do that. I mean, you knew how to throw a ball, but the things that truly matter to us, we'll get to practice because they mean so much, because they're coming from our heart. And you will learn the skill, and the skill will be like, it's just going to come out of you because it's part of your nature. It's part of something that your heart desires and longs for. And so that's what's going to show up. And things are not as big of a deal as our egos want to make them. In that moment, it felt like missing the first or second bucket was the end of the world. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I had to learn to be with my little girl and be like, honey, there's going to be other buckets to shoot for. And again, learning how to practice with the buckets that matter, that truly matter to you, will help you develop a skill so that you will be able to make those shots when they really matter to your heart. And last but not least is that let's remember to play. Like, we've shot ping pong balls into buckets, or college into cups, right? Done it before, and was able to do it when I'm coming from this place of play. And when that pressure my ego puts on us or puts on you to figure it out, to get it right, you are losing your joy. And we are being guided to enjoy our challenges as much as possible, to see them as ways to remember our wholeness rather than try to prove ourselves. And that has been a big lesson of mine. And what's so important is that I hear people say, I've uncovered that before. I'm done. Whatever their, shadow piece is or their inner child work has been. But let me tell you, this is something I still practice to this day. This is where I am at with this part of my human experience. And I am so grateful. I'm so grateful for the compassion, the love, the remembrance of the importance of joy and play, and not to take it all so seriously. I mean, the lessons go on, and they're perfect for me, perfect for my remembrance of my divinity and my expression of love, just like your challenges and the ways your ego will keep you locked in to protection from something that's been unprocessed for you. That is a part of your journey that's been specifically part of your remembrance of the truth of who you are. And so this is the opportunity. And the only limit that we have here is our own selves, where our ego gets in the way and again says, I've already done that. I've already done the inner child work or the shadow work or whatever it is. If you have a challenge, there's more layers. There's more layers of you remembering that's waiting for you to receive. And that's what it is. It's a receiving, it's a gift. This is not a chore. That when we say, like, oh, I've got more inner work to do, that's your ego making it a chore. It's a freaking blessing. It is a blessing that you have this awareness to go within and process pieces that seriously may have been generationally passed down to you. And you have the wisdom and the insight to know how to work through it for good so that it's remembered and remember. It becomes a part of you and your remembrance of your whole self. It becomes a member of you rather than these parts of you that we've rejected. And that is such a freaking gift and a blessing because it will expand your capacity to love in ways you didn't know were possible because they weren't modeled to you. And you get to experience them in your heart and your being, even and especially when things aren't going as you want or planned or experience the challenge once again. And you remember the love that you are, you remember the expansiveness that you are. That's when life life is limitless. Like it just, and it seems counterintuitive because the outcome might not be there yet, but yet is the whole point. Because in this journey, it's about you anchoring in the knowingness and the love and the expansiveness and truly your divine nature that you innately are. So I hope this supports you. I hope you honor your unique, beautiful unfolding. There will be a time that if you stay on this path to remembering, that you will look back at your life with awe and courage, for the courage that of your willingness to challenge old upper limits and honor yourself, that you are willing to continue to expand when within you there was contraction, when all around you were stories of contraction, and you chose more love. And when you look at back at your life with that level of awe, you will have so much gratitude for everything that life has taken you through. And I say that with great love, honor, and compassion because I know some of the things that life has delivered upon people has been really challenging, but I haven't witnessed a person yet where that challenge led them to experiencing more of their humanity and compassion with love than they ever thought possible. It like somehow opened up something within them that they didn't have access to before. So this is where we hold the both and. We never want these challenges. Don't wish them upon anyone. There is horrendousness to some of life's experiences. And somehow, by the grace of the divine, whether that's God, goddess, whatever that is for you, there is some beauty that always unfolds if we allow ourselves the grace through that experience. So I honor you on your journey. I honor you for being able to recognize any upper limits and to remember that your human journey provides the perfect, imperfect experiences to remember your truth and truly anchor that into your being and the love and the divine nature that you truly are. So until next time, please take care.
I am so honored you have joined me today. If you enjoyed the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, subscribe so you don't miss any of our power-filled episodes. Also, if you know another who is strong, sensitive, and spiritual and wants to dive deeper into emotions and ancient wisdom so they too can create profound peace and fulfillment from within, please share this podcast. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to reconnecting with you soon.